Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. On this episode, I'm going to be discussing Contra Games because this September is Contra month on Playas Guide. I will be streaming through all of the Contra games on Twitch, YouTube, and Mixer throughout the month of December, leading up to the release of Contra Rogue Core. So let me give you a little bit of the history behind Contra before I get too in-depth into the games. Contra was based on an arcade game that was originally released in 1987. In 1988, it was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America. It is grossly speculated that the name Contra is based off of an Iran renegade group that used that name during the Cold War that the US was supplying weapons with. Contra, this is also speculation, was very influenced by the action film market of the 1980s, mainly by Schwarzenegger and Stallone for Rambo movies and Predator and Commando and the Alien movies, which they weren't in, but you could clearly see where the influence came from. The Contra series was censored in PAL regions and was released as Probotector because they did not want to portray violence against humans. Contra is recognized as a difficult game by many gamers, and this is one of the reasons that Konami included its legendary Konami code in the game. Most of the games have this included in it, with a few exceptions. So let's talk a little bit about the Contra games. So the first Contra was released on the NES. It was based on the arcade. Most of us know this game. I used to go over to a friend's house and play this game. We never really made it very far. As a child, I did find this game very challenging. As an adult, I made friends with several people who were excellent at the game, and I had to learn to keep pace. I'm personally not as big a fan of the original Contra as I am Super C. Super C is the sequel, the follow-up to the original Contra. I love this game. This is probably my favorite Contra game. It has an overhead view that replaces the tunnel running third-person view that we got in the original Contra, and I prefer that. So that could be one of the reasons why I like this game more, but it might not be. I just really like Super C. The original Contra is not a rare game by any means, but it is popular, and it's not too expensive and too hard to find, but I think it is a pretty quick moving game still on a lot of game store shelves because of its popularity and how playable it still is. Super C is a little bit more uncommon to find than the original Contra. You won't see it as often, but also not a very expensive game. It does have, a standard value. It's not a bargain game. I don't think any of the Contra games are, so don't expect to get a bargain on these games unless you happen to find a bargain. Then there was Contra Force, which also was released on the NES. So many people don't view Contra Force as a legitimate Contra game because it was a canceled game in Japan, which was supposed to be released called Arkhound. Because it was canceled, Konami rebranded it, and we got it over here in North America and know it as Contra Force. So to me, it's a lot like the Super Mario Bros. 2 thing. Super Mario Bros. 2 is always going to be Super Mario Bros. 2 and hold that place in my heart, while Contra Force, to me, will always be a Contra game. Konami slapped that brand on it, so I'm rolling with it. Another thing about Contra Force is that you're not fighting aliens in this game, you're fighting other soldiers. Contra Force is probably the rarest Contra game and most expensive, so this one is one that you definitely want to keep an eye out for, and don't expect it to get this one very cheap. Operation C. So this game was released on the Game Boy. You didn't quite get the full Contra experience because it was on such a small screen in that gray and green tones. The graphics really aren't bad. The gameplay is there if you like the first two Contra games. So this is a pretty solid game. It does present quite a bit of challenge. I usually struggle with the fifth stage boss, and it's a good game. I like this one a lot. Operation C, I don't see too often. It's sort of uncommon, but it's not really, that hard to find. You will come across it from time to time, and it's not that expensive. I would recommend picking up Operation C. Alien Wars is an excellent game on the Super Nintendo. It's very popular. It's not too hard to find, but it's not really a cheap game when you find it because so many people do enjoy this game. For me, Alien Wars is one that I probably struggled with the most out of a lot of Contra games, and I see so many people are really good at it. So it's one that I could use a bit of practice and want to play more of. Contra Hardcore. This game is really interesting because it changes up the characters. There's like a wolf dude and a robot, and it introduces a female protagonist as well, who all join the Contra Hardcore. And the graphics look really good for this game on the Genesis. It sounds great, looks great. I don't think there's too much to be said about it that isn't great. It is a difficult game and one of the more challenging of the retro Contra games. So the next games to be released was Contra Legacy of War, and I wasn't really a big fan of this game. I know that Konami was really trying to step it up with the graphics and the performance of the gameplay, but to me it just wasn't the same, the way you move around on the screen. But at this point, I think Contra's heyday had kind of ended on the Super Nintendo and Genesis. Contra Adventure was the follow-up, and this game, it has, what at the time was improved graphics, and it plays a little bit more like the traditional Contra games that most of us know and love on the 16-bit and 8-bit consoles. So this one I enjoyed. It is also, probably on the same level of rarity as Contra Legacy. It's out there. You will come across it, but you won't find it all the time. It's not the cheapest game, but neither of them are expensive. So I also want to point out that Alien Wars did get a release on the Game Boy as well. There's also Contra Advanced on the Game Boy Advanced, known as Alien Wars EX. So those games are out there too, although they're not, entirely unique games that stand alone in this franchise. Contra Shattered Soldier is the next installment in the Contra franchise. I thought this game was pretty good, but I did find it very difficult. In fact, both games on the PS2 in the Contra series I found to be quite challenging. This one, Neo Contra was the next one to be released in the Contra franchise, and I would put Neo Contra and Contra Shattered Soldier, I put them sort of on the same pedestal, whereas they're sort of uncommon games. They're somewhat desirable, but they're out there. You can find them. I think this can easily be said for almost every Contra game. And the final installment until Contra Rogue Core becomes available is Contra 4. This was released on the DS, which is an interesting choice. And this is a really good Contra game. It plays a lot like the original Contra game. There was a bunch of other Contra games that were released on various consoles as downloadable only games. I think there was even a mobile game at one time. I don't know too much about those, so I don't have footage of them that I can show you in this video. But I will say overall, I like all the Contra games, even though they vary in difficulty. I know some people say, oh, this Contra game is bad or that one is bad. One that frequently comes up is that people don't like Contra Force. I myself do. It does have lag that is a definite drawback and a deterrent when you're playing the game, because it does lead to some very cheap deaths, which I don't enjoy. So maybe if I had to pick one, it would be the worst, but I love the NES so much that I would give it to maybe one of the games on like the PS1 or PS2 that, don't have quite that same style of gameplay. Alright, players, there you go. I covered just about every Contra game ever to exist in this video, which I don't normally do, but I do want to do some more videos in the future on different gaming franchises and maybe find some more interesting facts to share. That's it for this episode. Hopefully you'll join me on stream live every Friday where I'll be playing through these Contra games leading up to the new Contra Rogue Core.